All right, my friends, you're back. I think I may have even done things right this time. Can you hear me okay? Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? David Schuster can hear me. Clear and loud. Thank you, Jim. Hey, folks, welcome back for this Wednesday edition, which these days is the only StreamYard edition, I think, of whatever we're now calling this. Let's call it Cliff's Edge or Cliff's Note, or how about just a live stream where we point out how terrible Republicans are. And this week, the media. I have the perfect person here to come on with me. I'm coming to you, of course, as I often say, but now sometimes forget to say, live from the Queen City, the Radio City, Cincinnati, right here in the Midwest, where David Schuster is from. David Schuster is here.
Hello, Cliff.
How's it going, man?
I'm going to move. I'm going to adjust. You know, I'm never so good at like adjusting how this is all framed, but I'm working on it. It's good. So, I mean, if you ignore the news about gross domestic product dropping in the first quarter, which means that if we now have a second quarter of GDP contraction, we're officially in a recession. Woohoo!
All right. Self-inflicted. Impressive. Dark Shabdu here says I'm wearing the Pope funeral blue. Is that what I'm wearing? I still probably would have gotten a better seat than Donald Trump got. He was like, all the way back there in the nosebleeds. And I think he's pretty pissed about it with fake Melania. So, we'll move on from there. I don't know what to say because there are a lot of people, of course, who are still Catholic and have mixed emotions. Certainly this Pope was one that was far superior than, shockingly, the Bavarian-ish one before him. But we'll go on to the news of the day, which is, as far as I'm concerned, I wrote a Substack. David has a video in there. This is our paid one. It's going to come out after we do this show today. David's video, I think, is the most hilarious one I've seen yet. And I'm not kidding. It's actually quite awesome on Carolyn Levitt. I expand upon the theme of my thumbnail here, which is essentially, I mean, if just looking at a Photoshop picture of Donald Trump and Carolyn Levitt and others with MS-13 tattoos all over their faces and arms tells you that someone's an MS-13. I'm going with Trump's an MS-13 from now on. I'm convinced of it.
Oh my God. So Cliff, I finally looked at the Terry Moran interview. I watched it was a 45-minute interview. I watched about
tragedy, David, so far,
including the whole section about Kilmar Brego Garcia. And I was like, Donald Trump says some really stupid things and makes me sort of feel uncomfortable. This was like one of the more uncomfortable things I've ever seen because he just kept doubling down. But he has the tattoos, but he has MS-13. And Terry's like, no, that was Photoshop. And the White House last week admitted that it was Photoshop, but obviously they haven't told Donald Trump. But Trump keeps saying, no, but he has MS-13. And the thing is, when you look at the photo, you can clearly see based on the type and the different coloring that it has to be Photoshopped. And it was a terrible Photoshop. It wasn't even very good Photoshop, and Trump is still digging in. Now, if he wants to claim that, this guy's MS-13, he can do that. Bring him back to the United States, as the Supreme Court has said he should facilitate. Have your hearing, and then if a judge determines, no, he doesn't belong in this country, then you take him out. But the fact that Trump's not doing anything except sticking to this Photoshop picture is crazy.
Well, and, we have this weird due process thing in the, Constitution, that other strange thing that we have in this country. And again, we have to laugh at this, and we will laugh at this because he's an idiot. We also, every time, have to acknowledge there is an innocent man, or as far as we know, innocent, because he has not gotten due process and because he's not an MS-13, or at least not due to any tattoos on him, because those are fake, sitting in the equivalent of a concentration camp right now in El Salvador with gang members. And one of the reasons he escaped El Salvador is he was scared for his life from gang members. So, I mean, that this is even going on and that Trump is trying to fight it is sickening. But what I like, let's get your info up there for everybody. Go join David Schuster's Substack, everybody. David is over there doing more and more, and he's contributing to mine. And again, I would have liked to see David do this interview, because I'm going to ask David right now. I know you're sharing a lot of your ire, or saving a lot of your ire for Trump. And of course, every time in every part of Donald Trump's presidency where you think he can't get any worse, cruelty, incompetence, stupidity, lies. He finds a way in each separate area he sucks at, which is what I refer to as a combination of the seven deadly sins and the four horses of the horsemen of the apocalypse. But he finds a way to get worse at all of them. And I go after, and you can tell me if you think I'm too harsh. I haven't put it out yet. I can still edit it, but I go after Terry Moran, because to me, this was a moment in time where we saw all sides of it. We saw the increasing of the last 30, 40 years since this con man named Newt Gingrich got elected, and they actually started having con men in leadership in the Republican Party. There were people with stupid ideas before that, a lot of them. I don't think anybody had been in leadership, you can tell me if I'm wrong, who was an actual con man, knew that everything was just BS and just cared about power. And so there's that. But it's that he says kind of lightly, Terry Moran, like, oh, well, that's, photoshopped. And like his body language is defensive. It's sort of leaning back. I have this picture of Trump's leaning forward. He's like, he has it in his knuckles. He has his knuckles. Well, that some people, and he even at that point said, he's like, well, some people say there's a connection, but let's move on. And that's where I lost my shit. No, let's not move on. An innocent person, as far as we know, an innocent family man was kidnapped illegally and thrown into a gulag under a fascist in a foreign country. And a newscaster sits there and says, move on. I mean, what is it that you want to talk about that's more important than that? That to me, I'll just say this last part, David, because I wrote in there and I want to hear you, which I said, again, to me, if you don't sit there and either force that big fucking baby to admit that his White House said that it was photoshopped, and that his own White House has said they made a mistake when they sent this man there, that he's keeping him there, even though he knows it's a mistake. If you don't get him to either say that or get up and walk out of the interview like the big baby he is, I consider it a failure.
Yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent, in that, when Terry Moran sort of concluded this whole section about the Photoshop and said, well, it's disputed. Well, the only dispute is between the right-wing activists who somehow believe this and Donald Trump and reality. The reality is this is Photoshop. There are people in the White House who acknowledge it was Photoshop. So there's no dispute on the facts. There may be a dispute on Donald Trump's opinion of it. But yeah, I wish Terry Moran had said, no, this is Photoshop, and that's a fact, and you can say whatever you want. And Donald Trump said, oh, Terry, this is your great opportunity. I chose you because I didn't know who you were, but that's okay. And he's like, basically saying to Terry, hey, this is something of a plum that you've got in this interview. Try to sort of play that game.
Yep. And it's the domination too. It's that puffed out chest thing he does, where he's like, well, you're lucky to be talking to me. And then again, that's where Terry Moran should say, excuse me, I don't even know what his title is, but something chief correspondent at ABC. I am part of a free press and the Constitution that holds you accountable. I'm not lucky to have gotten an interview. I expect you to give me answers. And if you were to see this interview in Ireland, if you were to see this interview, because I recently, a few months ago back, well, time's flying, 4 months back, was in France, when they were gearing up for some things going on there, you don't see interviews like this. The press literally gets in their faces.
I think people in Europe and other places would say that the American media has become, at least the people who get access to Donald Trump to do these interviews, have become wussified, if that's the right word. And that is, they sort of know that Donald Trump's going to lie, and they've sort of taken that into account. And Terry Moran's like, all right, well, I know he's going to lie, and I'm just going to sort of play it off. And I may make sort of note that Donald Trump is saying something that's not true, but I'm just going to try to cover as much ground as possible. And I'm with you. I think if you get an opportunity with Donald Trump, and this is the only interview that Terry Moran will get, I guarantee, you need to sort of go balls to the wall, hold him accountable. And if Donald Trump storms off and walks out, because Donald Trump at one point said, oh, Terry, why don't you just say, yes, this is what it is, and then we can move on. I mean, because that's what Donald Trump is used to. He's used to having a bunch of yes men and women around him and in Congress, and sycophants, of course, in conservative media. So Donald Trump hears all this wonderful stuff and nobody's willing to tell the truth. It's the media's job to tell the truth and say, no, I'm not going to play this game. The fact of the matter is this is Photoshop. The fact of the matter is GDP is down 0.3%, and you can't blame that on Biden because Joe Biden's last quarter in office, last year, GDP grew by 2.4.
We were the strongest economy. We had the best jobs market in 70 years.
GDP is down. And it's the same thing with Caroline Leavitt. I mean, you mentioned the video that we have on our Substack, on Blue M Substack. A lot of people are referring to Caroline Leavitt as Baghdad Barbie because the stuff she says is so ridiculous, and it makes a lot of people think about this guy named Baghdad Bob, who was the information minister in Iraq during the
David
Iraq
weaves that in, by the way, folks. Does a great job.
The tanks are not in not in Baghdad. We are slaughtering the Americans. And then you see the tank like rolling behind the shot. And what's Caroline Leavitt is just as ridiculous. And that was sort of the comparison with the video today. But I am shocked that, I mean, people, it's one thing, look, we all know politicians sometimes stretch the truth or the lie or the twist things. But to be able to try to say with a straight face the lies that are coming out of this White House and of this president is just unprecedented.
Well, when you reach the point of, and again, for a reason people quote this, we've always been at war with East Asia. I mean, when you reach the point where you look people in the face in an Orwellian fashion and tell them the exact opposite, like job creation, we're here to celebrate 100 days of great job creation, and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, you're just lying. Yeah. And you're not just lying, this is why the term gaslighting came up. You're telling people the opposite of the actual truth, and you're doing it on purpose. There are all kinds of lies, some worse than others. You're looking people in the face, and you're lying. The media in the room knows you're lying. You know that the media knows that you're lying, right? The media knows that that they know that you're lying. Like, it's not, in that game can't be played. And that is my problem. Again, like, maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I should have you look over, because what I wrote, if I publish it about Terry Moran, was really, really not nice. And I don't like ripping the crap out of reporters, as institutions. Corporate media sucks. I don't like to pick on individual reporters unless they obviously have very much earned it, and there's a bunch who have. And I always make sure to say there still are some terrific ones out there. Of course, it's dwindling, right? Like, I used to say that, and it was like, well, you've still got Jim Acosta, and you still got, and these people are falling like flies, leaving these places. And actually, a lot of them are going to Substack, which we are also broadcasting to right now. So hello to any Substackers who are joining us. But I'm sorry, to me, a David Schuster runs that interview differently. And again, I don't care what the reason is. Because I didn't just say, I talked about his posture and how he looked sort of backed up and Trump was leaning forward and the body language was awful. But I also talked about, look, there could be a number of reasons. I showed an organizational chart of the ridiculous monopoly that ABC is a part of. I mean, you almost can't throw a stone without hitting somebody you'll have a conflict of interest with. You're like, oh, look, the military channel owned by us. It's Disney, us. It's Marvel, us. It's ridiculous. I mean, I couldn't even think of all of them. ESPN, there's about 1,000 entities under there in the chart I put in there. And so when places are worried about profits and shareholder value and these kinds of things, of course, you can't almost say anything without offending somebody in the orbit of the company you're in, which is why it was ridiculous. I had a great talk with Brian Karam once when he was on here about the 1980s, when we thought it was insane that there were something like 35 to 40 companies that owned most of the media. Now it's 6. Mm-hmm. And so it could be because of that, right? It could be because he himself wants access. I don't care. That's not enough of a reason. Like, you have to be willing to give up access to tell people the truth. And go ahead.
That's so well said, because it also gets to the other, I think, big media story of the week, and that is, 60 Minutes. Their executive producer resigned rather than continue to try to have to, battle with the Trump administration and, and the internal battles that he was facing. He had fought as hard as he could and realized that, corporate at CBS wasn't talking to him because they wanted to control his stories. And so he resigned, and he resigned essentially blowing up bridges with CBS corporate on the way out. The guy that I think has been like great in this, who I wish had done the Trump interview, is Scott Pelley, because in Scott Pelley, the senior correspondent in 60 Minutes, who's been around for a while, Pelley comes on at the end of 60 Minutes and again repeats that CBS corporate is trying to interfere with 60 Minutes in a way that they have never done before. And Pelley really took a flamethrower, if you read between the lines, to CBS corporate and Paramount. If Scott Pelley had done the interview with Donald Trump, I guarantee that would be a very different interview. And Scott Pelley wouldn't roll over and take the BS that Donald Trump was spewing. But Scott Pelley and folks like him will never get these interviews these days, because even within ABC, there is a jockeying in terms of, okay, you got to sort of have some access. You want to be able to get the big interview. And then once you get the big interview, well, you got to be polite. So yeah, you can sort of push back a little bit, but you can't be as fierce as a Scott Pelley or a Cliff Schechter or David Schuster would be, because then that makes your corporation look bad. And Donald Trump then gets really mad. So they're sort of playing this line. We even saw this with, if you go back to the 2024 campaign, I railed against Jake Tapper and Dana Bash with that Joe Biden, Donald Trump debate, because even though I like them and respect them, personally, professionally, I thought they dropped the ball when they agreed to do a debate where they would only ask the question and they wouldn't hold anybody
fact check.
They would not do any fact checking.
Which is ludicrous.
And
it's a waste of time.
Jake Tapper said, no, I want to do some fact checking. And Jake Tapper, Dana, they could do fact checking in real time. That's how well they know these issues. But Jake was told, no, you're not going to do any fact checking. And if that's what you want to do, we'll find somebody else at CNN who will moderate this interview and simply throw up the questions. And so Jake's thinking, okay, this is probably the highest profile gig I'll ever have. Okay, I'll just ask the questions. And he and Dana were counting on Joe Biden doing the fact checking. When Biden couldn't do it, then it was so obvious that it belonged to them. And they were like, no, we can't say anything. And to me, that was an absolute media disgrace.
Yep.
And those are the rules that Donald Trump wanted. He didn't want fact checking because he doesn't want people to call out his BS.
And that's the thing. Again, you have to be willing to give these things up. Or, I could spend a lot of time. You could have spent a lot of time over however many years kissing asses at MSNBC and CNN. I was once screen tested for a show at CNN, right? If I wanted to do that, but I'm just saying, or after I was a columnist for a while, the Daily Beast, and then they started turning into a complete, they went once, an old friend of mine who then went on to Rolling Stone, Noah Shackman, left, and it changed. It became basically a gossip rag. I didn't want to write for them anymore, and I called them out and ripped them, and I knew they'd never let me write for them after that. If you're not willing to take apart the organization that you are working with or for, and again, look, a lot of these news personalities we're talking about have made a lot of money. You can make more of this argument when it's people who are in jobs where they're really worried about their financial security. But anchors at these major places, are certainly making high 6-figure, if not 7-figure salaries. If you didn't spend all your money on a collection of like Porsches, like Jay Leno, or traveling around the world like Clarence Thomas, but paying for it yourself, you should have some money, and you should be able, especially a bunch of the really good ones are a little bit older, you should be able to get up with your dignity and walk the hell out and say, I will not do this interview. And that's when I lost faith in Jake Tapper, somebody I used to respect, and said, and now he's coming out with this piece of crap book, with Alex Thompson, one of the biggest dumb fucks in media. Whereas he had Axios or wherever. I lambasted that guy at one point there. He basically spent the last 2 months of the campaign, or however many months, just talking about Joe Biden lying about his cognitive state. Nothing about, and there were real questions about whether Biden covered up some of that. And what I'm not even saying, but at that point, Biden wasn't even in the damn race anymore. And he's still talking about it because he had a book he had to keep promoting. And that was more important to this guy as a reporter than making sure that somebody who would respect the democratic process at least got a fair shake. If not,
and then to take it back to Terry Moran. I mean, Terry Moran has been at ABC News. Gosh, I remember traveling on a Clinton trip. So this goes back 20 some years. And Terry Moran was a White House correspondent then for ABC. He has been around ABC News for at least 30 years. I guarantee Terry Moran is doing fine financially. And if somebody who's sort of towards the end of his career and has made all this money, if he can't hold somebody accountable in sort of a fierce adversarial manner, and Terry Moran sort of feels the need to sort of play it nice and say, oh yeah, well, that's just a dispute and let's move on. If Terry Moran, if that's the approach he's going to take, well, what do you think the younger journalists at ABC News, NBC, CBS are looking up? And they're the ones who, as you point out, they're starting their career. They're trying to, make a living at this. They may have kids or family that they have to support. Are they going to go out on a limb and call out any politician's BS if Terry Moran won't?
I mean, it's modeling the worst behavior possible. I mean, and it leads me to a quick story. And I actually hope this guy, he may be watching. He's a good friend. In a roundabout way, he's how I actually met Phil Collin of Def Leppard, who ended up being on our 12-hour broadcast, which is John Lieberman. When I was, so the only time I've ever been paid, as I've joked about before, was Sinclair in 2004. And I would go on, take on a lot of their right-wing nuts. Armstrong Williams, remember that character who took money to write about good things about the Bush administration education policy in USA Today? He was their guy from the right, other people. But John was somebody who was actually right down the middle. He was the head of the DC bureau, young guy out of Northwestern, smart guy at the journalism school, and he wanted to go see what was going on in Iraq. I don't know if you remember when all this happened, David, 2003, 2004. And so he went on a trip to Iraq, recorded what he saw, and he came back and he was going to tell stories both good and bad. Yep. And this is the same time they refused to air on their stations the Ted Koppel list of those dying in Iraq. And they said to John, basically, no, you can't air that. Anything bad, only good stuff, because it's President Bush. And if you go out and you say anything, we will sue you, and we'll, and John, here's John, a guy who is, I think, a couple years younger than me. And this is now, this is 2004. So 20 years, we're going back a while. He's probably in his late 20s at the time, 30 years old. He had a long career ahead of him. And he couldn't do it. He just said, I will not do this. And he went straight to I think he went to the Baltimore Sun or wherever it was. And it became this huge breakout story. They fired him. They sued him. He countersued. He ended up doing a huge number of interesting things, like reporting for America's Most Wanted. He wrote a book about Whitey Bulger, up in Boston. He ended up for a while he ended up as a correspondent for Howard Stern. And that's how I met him, because Robin Quivers had a show when they went over to Sirius Satellite, and they had 47,000 channels. They didn't know what to do, how to fill them with content. So she started this variety show for a bit. And they had on like Lisa Lampanelli and Phil Collin. They're like, we need a guy who knows about politics, or a woman who knows about politics, but doesn't take themselves too seriously. And John, luckily for me, was sitting there, was like, I know the guy. And I got to go on this show, and it was a lot of fun. But the point here is, John is somebody who gave up a mainstream media career because it was the right thing to do, and he wouldn't tell lies about Iraq. And he was willing to do this at a young age. So I'm sorry, when you see people like Terry Moran and people like that, who again, I'm not saying Terry Moran is like 80 or something. I don't know how old he is, 50s, 60s, whatever he is, but he certainly made a lot of money over the years. And if he were to leave ABC because he did the right thing, he would have plenty of places that he could go in our new media atmosphere. And I'm tired of it. These interviews do nothing but help propagandize people into thinking that Trump is acceptable. And it's amazing that these polls are coming out where just a crazy one just came out. 73% of people, I think it said overall, think Trump wants the powers of a dictator, and which included about 20% of Republicans, about 60% of independents, and basically every Democrat. Like the people are catching on. And again, Terry Moran, and maybe after this is over, I'll have you look over a draft of this, because I get pretty harsh, but I watched it and it fucking pissed me off, because I thought to myself, what would a real broadcaster do here? And either some from the past, some I've seen in foreign countries. I would have liked to have Jack Germond sitting there with a bottle of whiskey, with a bottle of whiskey in one hand, screaming shit at Trump about being a liar and making Trump. I mean, that is what I'm joking partially, but like not partially. This isn't supposed to be a friendly affair. This isn't supposed to be, hey, let's have cocktails together afterwards. This is supposed to be a grilling. And there was nothing close to that. And he let this guy get away with, as you said, blaming Biden for everything, the MS-13 garbage. I mean, that MS-13, Knuckles thing was the equivalent of, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats of the people that live there. I mean, it was just as much bullshit.
Right. Well, one more story about, the people who interview Trump. The person that has interviewed Trump the most over the last several years is Bret Baier over at Fox News. And Bret, at times, he has pushed a little bit, but he has also walked the line and tried to sort of be polite and not create too much of a scene. Well, I'll tell you, I remember, when I was at Fox News in 2000 covering the Florida recount, Bush v. Gore. And one of the big storylines that came out, and I was sent to Tallahassee by Fox. It was my final 2 years at Fox News, and to cover, what was going on. And one of the storylines that conservatives in the Bush crowd kept promoting was that the reason Florida was even close and that Gore may have won is because the networks disenfranchised Bush voters in the Panhandle. Because Florida has two time zones. They've got the 7 p.m. Eastern time zone and then 7 p.m. Central, which is the Panhandle. And so when the networks called the state for Gore initially.
You're talking about Floribama?
Yeah, Floribama. The theory was that, a lot of Republicans stayed home. And Bush would have won the state had the networks not made the premature call before all of the polls were closed in Florida. Now, remember, the networks made that call at like 7:50 p.m. Eastern time. Well, one of the first correspondents, in addition to me, who was sent to Florida was Brett Baer, who was then, I think, an Atlanta-based correspondent. And he was tasked with going to the Panhandle to find all of these Bush voters who are about to vote for Bush, heard the networks call it for Florida, decided, I'm not going to vote.
Let's go just drink some moonshine and party.
Right. And so Brett comes down to Tallahassee, and he tells me that he couldn't find one. He couldn't find a single voter who either got out of line or didn't vote because the networks had called Florida. Most of them didn't know the networks had called Florida for Gore. If they were in line, they were voting anyway. So the story was absolute bunk. And I said, well, Brett, you're going to do that, right? Because every night on Fox News, there is a conservative honoraire who's saying Bush would have won Florida had it not been for the media calling Gore early. And Brett's like, I can't do that story. And I'm like, why not? That's Brett's, well, because, that's one of the talking points, and because that's, that they want to keep saying that. And it wouldn't be good for me to do that story. And I'm thinking, Brett, your job is not what's good for you.
Right.
Your job is to inform people of the truth. And the truth is this was an absolute conservative canard that the media somehow cost George W. Bush Florida by calling it for Gore at 7:50 p.m. Eastern time.
Of course.
That's bull. You need to report this. And Brett's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I thought, this guy is going to go far at Fox News because he knows where his bread is buttered, and he cares more about himself than he does about the truth. And we've seen, countless stories about, for example, Brett, I think in 2020, trying to, push Fox to take back the call for Biden in Arizona. I mean, that's the game that Brett Baer has played in his career. And he is the main news anchor at Fox News who has done the most interviews with Donald Trump, in part because Brett has played the game. And it's a game for Fox News and for Brett.
And that's the thing, right? And I mean, again, I don't want to go into the whole sort of thing. I have an alternative history to write at some point about, me going in going back to the future style, to the year 2000. And if you remember when Marty McFly showed up and he said, I'm Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, and he scared his dad into asking his mom out so he could make sure that relationship happened, I would go into Sandra Day O'Connor's room and wake her up and say, you are going to regret this, which of course she later said she did. He is not a moderate. He is a right winger, and you're going to see a lot of what you support fall if you do it. And of course, she was the fifth vote. They shut down the voting, and there's still no doubt to this day when you count the combination of butterfly ballots and Dade County being shut down. And one of the ones up at the front banging on that door, shutting it down, was what's his name, who keeps sexually harassing men, but he's not gay. The head of what do you call it? Of the CPAC.
Jeffrey?
No. Schlapp. Matt Schlapp.
Yeah.
Who's now been busted by about 3 different men, and I've got friends who I don't care. I mean, let's just say have seen him at all sorts of clubs in DC. And you know what? Like, I don't even, that part obviously doesn't matter. The part that matters is he assaults people and can't admit to himself who he is. And maybe those things tie into each other. But if you see one of the pictures of the people up front banging on that door to scare the Miami-Dade, folks, if you think January 6th was something new, it was bigger, it was more violent. But if you thought that using those kinds of intimidation tactics are new for the GOP, Matt Schlapp was right up in the front there with a whole bunch of aides to Tom DeLay and people like that doing that. And, it gets exhausting after a while. It gets exhausting.
And your point about alternative history, I mean, it matters, right? Because if Gore had, Gore, by all accounts, he got more votes in Florida. He should have, been declared the winner of the election. If Gore is president, do we really, 9/11 maybe still happens, but when we go into Afghanistan, do we really go into Iraq? If we don't go to Iraq, then, what happens to the United States then? All the blood and treasure that was wasted in Iraq. I mean, so we play this out, and then also in terms of what it does to politics, and
so it changed everything, David. The butterfly effect of that. First of all, you've got a guy in office who his main priority is climate change and gets it, who had a Democratic House, if I remember correctly, and then, maybe it was a Republican House, but then when Jim Jeffords switched, it became a Democratic Senate. Maybe that doesn't still happen. Again, hard to play alternative histories, but here's what I know. You have a climate change champion who's been speaking about it for years and understood it there. You've got somebody who absolutely wouldn't have gone into Iraq from his past history. You have somebody who would have gone into Afghanistan and it turned it into the longest war of all time with feckless, not knowing what we're even doing there. And expecting them to throw flowers and chocolates at us, but somebody who would have gone in with the kind of mission we had in Desert Storm, which is get the people, who get the people who hit you, get the top people who harbor them, give the other folks who are trying to fight for a free Afghanistan a fighting chance, maybe arm them, do what you need to do, and get out within 6 months. Send in maybe Army Rangers, Special Forces, Navy, SEALs, whoever, and get the hell out of there instead of, because that's what we were there for, instead of turning this into another long, insane occupation that turned into the longest war in American history. It was all done wrong. He would have read the briefings on 9/11. Could he have stopped it? Maybe not. But we arrested that guy in Minneapolis, ahead of time, who was just trying to learn how to steer planes, not take off and land. And Bush was busy clearing brush, not acting on that. You have to believe, maybe Al Gore disrupts some of it. Maybe it's not who knows? I know that it would have been better. That's what I know. It had to be better. And, and so here we are. And this is the stuff, because I keep bringing this up. Like, I accept never Trumpers in our rank. There are a lot of people that have changed and for the better. I mean, I like Joe Walsh. I just went on his show Thursday night. I consider he's a great guy. I like him. I like, we had Fred Wellman on. I think a lot of these folks have changed and whatever, but that doesn't mean you can deny that this has been a long and ongoing pattern. It wasn't like Trump changed the Republican Party. The Republican Party kept changing so that there was a glide path for Trump to land, because they kept lying to their own voters about things like the vote in Florida, for example, and things of that nature, and using all sorts of derogatory claims, to attack Democrats that weren't true. And it became all about power. And that's that's the kind of place where Trump can operate, and so I don't think there's any way. But in any case, I don't mean to get deeply into all that. The Terry Moran thing, to me, I was deeply angered and offended that you get this one chance, and you have this meek body language, these meek questions. You don't push back. If you push back, you're like, oh, well, that was Photoshop, but you won't even say it in like a loud voice. You should be demanding and saying, sir, Mr. President, that was Photoshopped. Your White House has accepted that. You should be, with confidence, with strength, not with this. Well, that was Photoshop.
Well, and one of the things that, that one of the tricks, and this as well, is let's take this scenario. Mr. President, was Photoshopped, and he says, no, it wasn't. And you say, why don't you know that was Photoshopped? How come your staff isn't telling you? Why do you think it was Photoshopped? Where are you getting this from? Who is telling you this? Has this person ever lied to you before? You question after question after question until it's so obvious to the person you're interviewing that they're on, they don't have a leg to stand on, instead of just saying, well, it's disputed.
Or do something crazy. Right. Or do something crazy and actually bring that person's life history and context to look, Mr. President, you said they were eating dogs and cats in Springfield. That was a lie and a conspiracy. Okay. You have repeated election lies forever.
Yeah, why do you, Mr. President, why do you lie so much?
Why should we trust you when you have lied about A, B, C, and, you could come up with a long list of things I could off the top of my head, but they don't bring that context. They don't bring that aggressive, sort of like the posture where I am here not to be your friend. I'm here to hold power to account.
Right.
And it just seems like it's all broken down, and they're just useless. I mean, every once in a while, here and there, yes, as I say, there are some good folks among them. There are some good people still in mainstream media who do some good work. But overall, as these institutions, I mean, they've done worse than just fail us in terms of not reporting the truth. They flat out reported the opposite of the truth. We see no connection between Russians. FBI sees no connection between Russians and Trump a week before the election versus Hillary. Stuff like that, where they've actually told people the opposite of the truth and given them a permission structure to vote for this crazy person.
Yep. Yeah, and when you have an electorate, a public that is as misinformed as Americans are, It takes literally an economic recession or depression and record inflation in order to even sort of move the needle a little bit to the polls that we were talking about earlier. There's still so many Americans who, fake news, I don't believe in my economy. Economy's fine. No, it's not.
Nope.
And
Yeah,
but
I was talking about
you can find your folks. I mean, you can find the Daily Signal or whatever it is, some of those other right-wing organizations that will tell you the economy's great. Peter Navarro, the Trump economic advisor, went on, I think, CNBC or Fox today and said, we like where we are with the GDP, because he's insists that a whole bunch of record number of manufacturing companies are coming to the United States. No, they're not. The government's own data shows that they're not coming. And even if they do come, it's going to take 6 months to a year before you're going to know whether or not the Trump tariffs have prompted some companies to actually come to the United States. So those are flat out lies. But you can find this alternative reality, this alternative universe in plenty of conservative media and blog spots and websites. So the people who want to believe Trump, they can find all sorts of stuff to back up.
Sure. I mean, that's the thing, is they can always find these justifications. And that's the thing, is if you give them more justifications, if you let them get away with stuff, if you let them lie about this kind of stuff, all that's going to do here. I wanted to show you this, by the way, while I was doing it. Because you brought up the Daily, would you bring up the Daily Wire? To me, they're all the same.
Signal? Daily, I don't know.
Daily Signal, Daily Wire. This is the Daily Caller going after me for my appearance on Jim Acosta because I apparently, and they misspelled my name with the extra H in it. And I know people have done that, but I look back, they apparently went after me. I don't notice these things like 2 years ago, and they also misspelled it. So they really can't seem to get my name right. But I did enjoy hearing, he said on Jim Acosta's show that Democrats should call Trump a fascist more. I'm like, yes. I mean, I don't know. Is that something that's supposed to embarrass me? I'm not sure what it is. Like, is this clickbait? Do you think you're saying that I'm, are you making me feel bad about the fact that I think you guys should actually cover the fact that this guy is a dictator? Acts like a dictator, speaks like a dictator. I don't know.
And even the polls that Daily Caller has access to, the polls show that most Americans believe that Donald Trump cannot be trusted to act responsibly with his powers. Well, if you're going to act irresponsibly with your powers, that's one of the hallmarks of a fascist. So most Americans do believe that Donald Trump is out of control, that he's not trustworthy, that he's incompetent, that he's all about his own sort of power. And if the polls show that most Americans believe that, why is the Daily Caller, I don't know, raising questions about you describing Donald Trump as a fascist? Maybe the Daily Caller should say, how come more Americans aren't, and more media figures are not calling Donald Trump a fascist, because most Americans believe that he is.
Right. Well, it was a media outlet and not a let's call it a propaganda rag founded by Tucker Carlson, funded with what? I don't know, maybe Kremlin money, maybe who knows, right? Then it would do that. But it only exists for one reason. It's part of that right-wing atmosphere of just constantly pounding on BS and making up lies and sharing, narratives like that. I mean, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, same thing. If it walks like a fascist and quacks like a fascist, I mean, we do have some institutions. We do have, we've had a democratic culture, at least somewhat, that's been hurt over the years, particularly recent years, but still exists to a certain degree. So yeah, Trump's numbers and everything you're looking at are crashing. But I was having a talk earlier. I was talking to Tony Michaels, who a lot of people here know because they watch Tony's show too, and we were talking about that. Like, imagine if these guys came in, and imagine if Trump didn't dump Elon Musk into Doge, a guy who maybe has so little ability to read the room, he must actually be blind. Okay, he went in. If they had just, because they could have done this, and and this is what I expected, and this is what scared me about what they were going to do, is I thought they were going to do, with all the data they had, they were going to do like they did in their election with Cambridge Analytica, build profiles of government workers and pick out the ones who are either Democrats or never Trumpers or whatever, and target them for firings. Instead, they brought in a guy that understands nothing about politics and Elon Musk, and just had him mass fire government workers. Because, of course, to them, government workers all live in D.C. in their minds and probably are like black or, something, they're racist about it. And they don't realize, hey, you park ranger in Utah, you're a government worker. You working in an IRS building in Austin, you're a government worker. I mean, and in the end, what ends up happening is they fire. I mean, if they had gone about this slowly and they'd done it in a targeted fashion, imagine how scary it could actually be, because people wouldn't get it. Instead, they went nuts. And by going nuts and firing and having the third worst jobs month ever, because 80% of it caused by Doge, according to, I think it was the Financial Times that had that, by just firing all of these workers who then don't spend money and are worried about the economy. So they're pulling money at the stock market. And then Trump steps forward with his tariffs. And, it's like a 1-2 punch, right? Or really 1-2-3 punch. You've got this guy firing Republicans. You've got Trump stepping forward, and putting tariffs on Republican businesses. Again, all of us, but I'm talking about how he's lost his Republican support. And then they start this big deportation program. And Trump sadly got 47% of Latino males voted for him this time. So he didn't get a majority, but pretty close. And now you're deporting people. So you're pissing them off, but you're also deporting people that work often, are cheap labor on farms, ranches, places like that. And they're either leaving the country or they're either being sent out of the country, or they're scared. They're going to be. So they're not showing up to work. They're leaving. And you've got this now huge number of farms and ranches that are crashing. And these are all, places like Nebraska and Montana. These are Republicans. So, the biggest thing in that poll that showed him at 39%, under 40% that just came out. And again, I don't live and die by polls, but when you see, I always wait to look at a bunch of them. But when a bunch of them tend to match up, and if he's at 39% on that, I think he was at 33 or 32 for approval of the economy, of what he's doing economically. Well, he had lost 10 points among whites without a college degree. His voters, who, yes, he lost more even among women. I didn't know he could go much lower there. And he lost some among seniors, probably can't call the Social Security office anymore, worried about losing Medicare. So that's also, some of them are his own people. But whites without a college degree, I mean, that's his bread and butter. And he's fallen 10 points because the combination of things he and Elon have done have directly targeted their own people as much as us, if not more, per capita.
Yeah, I mean, the deviousness combined with the incompetence, in some ways, we're sort of lucky because I think the deviousness is there. I think a lot of people weren't expecting the incompetence to be along with it. Thinking about the beginning of the Trump term, I was absolutely convinced that Donald Trump was going to do nothing with the economy. And then once he took office, after a couple of weeks, say, hey, look how great everything is because I'm in office. Because, unemployment was low, manufacturing was up, GDP was up. Everything was going well at the end of the Biden administration. And although Americans were still worried about some inflation in some areas, and I was convinced that Donald Trump was simply going to wait, do nothing, reap the rewards of inheriting the Biden economy. And then after a month or so say, yep, look what I've done. Because of Donald Trump, look how great things are. And then maybe start to roll into some tariffs or have some sort of policy. But the sort of inconsistency of, I'm going to declare war on Canada. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. I'm going to do this tariff. No, I'm not. The heavy-handed nature, as you point out, that Doge fired all sorts of people as opposed to just specific. And it was destabilizing to all aspects of the economy across the entire electorate as opposed to just a few. And in my view, this is, again, Donald Trump's sort of incompetence. Thank God for it. I mean, as miserable as all of us are with the direction of the country right now, at least his deviousness is being stopped because of his own stupidity.
Right. Like again, it's what we used to say during his first term too, which is, and this one's a lot worse, 100 days already, or however many days we're at, but over 100 days. But it doesn't change the fact that, this time, the manner in which he thought shock and awe was the way to go. When the truth of the matter is the way to go was sit there and coast in Biden's economy, claim credit for it, and slowly have, somebody, whether it be an idiot like Elon Musk or somebody else. I know he owed Musk stuff for all the money Musk spent and who knows what else. But in the end, the way to do it would be, again, build a big database, try to find workers that were, if you're just evil and immoral like you do it slowly. You get rid of Democrats and independents and never Trump Republicans and people like that. You don't do it to your own people, but here, and the way in which you do it. I mean, Elon Musk is, all these stories of him sending an email at like 3:00 on Friday. Don't come in on Monday. You're fired. That kind of crap, which there've always been stories about him doing that at Twitter and Tesla and those places. So, I mean, again, that's just, he's an asshole and he'll always be one. And so that's just who he is. His own dad said he used to get beaten up in school because of what a dick he was. So, I mean, I'm not advocating that either. I'm just telling you that it happened. I'm not a fan of bullying, but I'm also not going to find a lot of sympathy for Elon Musk. And so I mean, what they did is they chose in this way to just spit in their own voters' faces as many times as they could. Imagine you're somebody who's either working a government job with your 401k, or you're somebody who's sitting there relying on your 401k, and you're retired, and your social security, and just double barrel, they're destroying you at some point, and then they're doing it in a way that's a big middle finger. Your local social security office has been closed down. You're fired from your job, as I said, on a Friday afternoon, and told not to come in on Monday. No severance, no nothing. Your health care is gone. I mean, how would any human, even the most selfish one in the world who doesn't care about anybody else, react to that? Well, they just destroyed you, and if you have one, your family. So you probably won't like them very much.
Yeah, and it underscores sort of the lack of credibility that the Trump crowd sort of brings to everything. I mean, I know we started the conversation by talking about, Trump's lack of credibility because of the photo and claiming that Garcia, he's got MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles, even though it's sort of Photoshop. Well, that's just one instance of a lack of credibility or a lack of competence in understanding Photoshop. If you want to take, say, the news today about GDP, Peter Navarro, I mentioned that he came out and said everything's fine. He also said a few weeks ago, this is the same guy who right after Trump's Liberation Day, when Trump rolled out all these tariffs, said, we're going to have 90 deals in 90 days.
All right.
And how many deals do we have so far? We're about 20 days into it. A big fat zero. Nothing, not one. And over the weekend, there was Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who I think went on ABC.
In David's video, if you guys go subscribe.
Got deals. Well, that's not a deal. That may be sort of an understanding about one aspect of it. And so time after time, incidents after incidents, I mean, the American people who might otherwise think, oh, yeah, okay, maybe we do need to make government more efficient and more effective, and we need to get rid of all sorts of government workers. Even if you believe that, based on everything else Donald Trump is doing, are these the people that you will trust to try to carry this out successfully? Of course not.
I mean,
in the midst of all of this chaos, and you reminded me of it just a moment ago when you were talking about Elon Musk and sort of the crazy deals. Normally, with a normal administration, the media is really into corruption, right? And conflicts of interest. And are there government contracts, no bid government contracts, or the pay to play stuff? That's usually our bread and butter if you're a Washington correspondent. We're not even touching any of that because
that's just normal every day. You can't get
and I have a feeling that history will someday look back and say there was more corruption, there was more pay to play, whether it was corporations or high tech or the law firms. There was more money going under the table with Donald Trump, his family and friends than the rest of the United States history combined with corruption. And the media is not able to pay any attention to that because there's so much other crap going on.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that's without a doubt. I'd bet my life on that. I don't care how corrupt certain other administrations were. I mean, again, corruption. He lies and he cheats like he breathes. I mean, it's an everyday. I mean, just think of the things, even the sort of the laws and ethical sort of norms we put into place to kind of prevent this stuff that essentially both the first term and this term we've ignored. I mean, the emoluments clause sitting right there from the beginning. Remember, everybody talked about that in the beginning. I mean, and then there's whole hotel floors being rented out by Qatar or Saudi Arabia or whatever, and God knows, all these other things that whatever was $10 million or whatever from Egypt that nobody's ever explained, and who the hell knows what else. He's got money in a Chinese bank. We find out after that first term and all this stuff, and it's like, nobody's just ever followed up on it because they already impeached him for 2 other things and we're investigating him for 3 other things on top of that. It's like, there's just no bottom to the amount of crime and corruption and all this, allegedly, except for the thing he was convicted of 30, something count of. That happened. And he was adjudicated a rapist. That also happened. And so, but I mean, yeah, they can't even cover that. And think of, besides the emoluments clause, a second one. They abused the first term and they've gotten even worse this term, which is the Hatch Act. I mean, they're out there literally with what, Trump, like, buy a Tesla, and all this. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, do we all have eyes? It's on video. It is a open and shut case in court that he violated the Hatch Act. That's a law. You can't violate that. I don't know what the exact punishment is, but what about the exact punishment if you multiply it by 1,000? Remember, she's of course disappeared now because she was smart enough not to do it the second time around. Remember Ivanka with the by Goya. You know, I mean, like they've done this so many times. And I mean, those are just two things I can think of off the top of my head. The Hatch Act and emoluments. My God, there's thousands more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And there's more we know about, there's more we don't know about. I mean, who's said it before? I think maybe it's Swalwell, Congressman Swalwell, who said we'll need a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. I really think that's true. I mean, it has to be like we need to win. We need to take over in the kind of numbers that FDR did or whatever. And we need to, this version of the Republican Party needs to be broken apart.
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is that the way that we did initially for 10 years or 15 years or so with the segregation with the South after the Civil War, and had we continued, we could have built a whole new culture there in the manner in which we did in post-war Germany and Japan. But of course, the whole corrupt deal with Rutherford B. Hayes, I don't want to go through it all. We pulled our troops out and they went right back to being the way they were. This Republican Party is a blight, a virus, a stain. It can't continue in its current form because there's so much corruption within the corruption, covered by corruption on top of corruption. Like it has to be taken apart so the various people can be banished from Washington forever, imprisoned, and the whole rest of it. And if that doesn't happen, then we can't keep functioning as a democratic system.
I'm with you. And look, I mean, some people say, well, why can't we have these investigations now? And the reason is because Pam Bondi and the Justice Department are as politicized as ever. And, you and I, Cliff, are old enough to remember that, during the Clinton administration 30 some years ago, because Bill Clinton, when he had been governor of Arkansas, had some business partners who were allegedly tied to some possibly fraudulent loans in the savings and loans industry, the Clinton administration's own Justice Department agreed to have a special counsel investigate this. Yep. That seems like quaint compared to like everything that's going on now. And those were the days, I'd say, until even, the first Trump administration, when you could count on, if there were these allegations of corruption, if there were allegations of malfeasance, that, okay, even your own Justice Department is going to appoint a special counsel who will have the independence to go and have a grand jury and see whether or not there's criminality.
Right. But that's my point. The radicals are behind that. The Ken Starrs and Newt Gingriches. In other words, they didn't want the truth. They wanted, Bill Clinton was uniquely talented as a communicator, and they knew they couldn't beat him. And so the only way to get rid of him was to force him out of office and all that. They already was becoming at that point, or had become, simply about holding, getting, and attaining power and all the great things that come along with that, money and this and that, and an easy life with all sorts of connections. And it wasn't, because the thing I often said that made me the angriest about the whole thing with Benghazi, as much as it made me angry about what they did, is the fact that as a country, we should have wanted to get to the bottom of what went wrong in Benghazi, because there were mistakes made there. So an ambassador did die. Okay. There are a huge number of errors. It doesn't mean they were Hillary Clinton's fault. It doesn't mean they were any individual's fault. But you know what? If we had an honest government, we should have wanted to know that. And we could have then had a bipartisan investigation into what happened in Benghazi. Wouldn't have even had to last that long, probably, again, but we should have done it. But the problem is when you're dealing with people, and this is why I will never, treat Republicans with respect unless I am 100% sure they're there in good faith. And there's very few of those left. Okay. But if they're behaving in bad faith, there's just no point. If they're doing it, if it's Benghazi or if it's like, Hunter Biden, if they're just doing it to score political points and rough up whoever the Democrat is and lower their numbers, which is what all of these things have been about. They're not trying to get to the bottom of it. They weren't trying to figure. And the thing about Benghazi was, look, there was a national security fuck up. We should have wanted to know what happened in what part of the chain of command. Did we make a mistake and leave these folks unguarded when we had a secret CIA site right down the road that could have gotten there immediately and maybe prevented it? We should have wanted to know that, but the Republicans had no interest in that. It was all just about damaging Hillary Clinton, who they were figuring was coming along next and they were going to have to run against, Yep. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Cliff, before we end, one thing that I want to know, and we haven't spoken for a couple of days, is since the news, Canada, the elections, the Liberal Party won. They had been behind by like 25 points just a few months ago. And then Carney runs as the anti-Trump, unites Canada. Both in terms of your background as a political strategist, what do you make of what happened in Canada, and what does it mean?
Well, remember that crazy truckers convoy from Canada?
Yeah.
So there are radical right-wingers up there too. There's some of the same sort of sovereign citizens. It's our rights. Government is evil. There's a certain percentage of those. And those folks, of course, are on the right up there and are the base of anybody who's running on the right. The problem for them is you can't keep them happy and win a majority at the same time. So, I mean, again, Trump somehow threaded the needle this past time, and voter suppression was a part of it, and other things are a part of it. I mean, again, everybody wants to forget that Putin was calling in bomb threats and the things that they were doing to try to make sure Trump won. But to go back to Canada, they found themselves in the same place. Trump was insulting their country. The country even turned on somebody I've now turned on and used to love, Wayne Gretzky, for pathetically. I mean, once I saw him sitting there with Kash Patel, he's dead to me. I mean, he was one of the most, I'm not a huge hockey fan, but he's one of the most entertaining, amazing players to watch. Fuck him as far as where I'm at now. Screw, I don't want anything to, And so even Canada, like probably one of the most popular people ever, was like, get lost, Gretzky, because he was hanging around with Trump. Well, so their right-wing government was kind of screwed, caught between a rock and a hard place. And this is a broader point, because this is what you're going to see with purple and blue state Republicans with elections coming up, which is, you've got this hardcore crazy base. It's bigger here than in Canada, but it was big enough in Canada that if you don't stay on the Trump side of he's right about this stuff, Canada, we are weak, we should be like America and blah, 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 you're going to lose them. And so, of course, they're right wingers because, but if you don't, you're going to get the Gretzky treatment, because most of the country is going to be like, you wimp. Even sort of center-right conservatives are going to be like, you're letting Donald Trump insult us and call us the 51st state and all this stuff, and you wouldn't even stand up for your country. So their conservative party had to stand up, in unison with all the others against Trump. And what my guess would be is that suppressed the vote. I would have to look at totals to know, but my guess is it made them look weak to the crazy far right of the base, and so they couldn't balance both factors, and they got screwed. They tried to sort of weave through and sort of take both positions, and they couldn't. So I think you're going to see this happening in other countries. And again, I think you will see this happening in blue and purple states. Remember that they pulled, Elise Stefanik back from the UN, not because, she's a white supremacist who shared white replacement theory and is a scumbag and a traitor and shouldn't be at the UN, but because she's only in a +10 district, and they're not confident that if they can win an open +10 district in New York. What does that tell you about their standing? And we know, because we saw what happened in those 2 Florida elections and the Wisconsin election, where the worst outshowing for Democrats was the one in Wisconsin, where we only turned things around by 11 or 12 points. The 2 others in Florida were 14 and 17, which means, depending on who we run, both the Florida and Ohio Senate seats at the end of this year, the special elections for Vance and Rubio should be in play, because they won by about 11 here and they won by about 13 in Florida, and Trump will not be on the ticket. And now all these voters that voted for Trump are turning against him. So that's what it tells me. It tells me that Trump, pissed off so many people up there. He basically found a way to where he put the conservatives up there in between a rock and a hard place, and he motivated everybody else to come out and vote against conservatives as a message to Trump, like they never voted. I'd love to see what the turnout was compared to normal turnout there. That's what I would guess, just not knowing all the specifics of what the numbers were, which I don't know off the top of my head.
You mentioned Ohio and the Senate race that's coming in Ohio. Who are you hearing on the Democratic side? I mean, does Sherrod Brown decide, okay, maybe my career is not over yet, and he runs? Or,
I tend to be a big one on passing to the next generation. He's 72, but he was one of the most effective at winning in a state like this and fighting and fitting in any trucker hall or union hall anywhere, for the longest time. I mean, right now, to me, us getting power away from fascists is most important. I think people forget he overperformed Kamala by 8 points. He only lost by 3. And if Trump's not on that ticket, he's winning that race by 5, 6, 7 points. I hope with this current atmosphere, even at 72, even if we can straighten things out during that term, and at 78 he can walk away, which I think for democracy is better that we don't have people serving in their 80s. But I think for right now, when you're in this kind of a situation, he's got the name recognition and the support and the skills, I would like to see him run again, because I haven't heard of a few for governor. I've not heard of anyone else yet for senator. And, we either need him. The only other person who had the right persona for this state, in terms of their background, was Tim Ryan. And he ran one of those apologize for being a Democrat campaigns. And if he learned from that and can run a stand up strong for Democrats, for working folks and whatever campaigns, I think he'd have a great shot. And I would support him, but he's got to run not one of these dumb, Kirsten Sinema type campaigns. Has to run, and there's others, right? I don't know the whole field. The problem is it's the 7th biggest state. It's expensive. You have to build name recognition. Tim Ryan and Sherrod Brown already have that. I don't know who else. There probably are a few other folks I'm not thinking of, but God, I hope. I mean, I see our friend Lefty Gramps in there, and I bring him up because he's an Ohioan. He says Sherrod has a chance. I would tell you right now that things can change. This is a moment in time. But I would tell you right now that with Trump's current numbers, and Trump not on the ballot, and the performance. So this is not me doing hopium. This is me doing an analysis of how much Trump's numbers have fallen here and in general, and how much Sherrod overperformed Kamala, and that he only lost in the end because Trump was on the ticket. I wouldn't even say he could win. I would say he would win if he ran again. If the things stay the same like right now. If Trump isn't able to pull some rabbit out of a hat or doesn't do something, God knows what, a false flag. Look, I wouldn't put anything past him. I really wouldn't. I hate saying stuff like that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but Trump kind of proves to you that you don't have to be one to know what he's capable of. But if these numbers stay like this, Sherrod Brown right now to me definitely wins if he runs. And I think Tim Ryan has a shot. Good
Hey,
shot.
Cliff, before we go, a little bit of business, and I'm going to make something of a pledge here to everybody. Subscribe to the Blue Amp Substack, and I'm going to put my money behind my mouth here, and that is, you can get the Substack for free, but you can also pay the $5 a month. And here's what I'm going to do: if you subscribe to Blue Amp Substack, and just on our Wednesday edition alone, you feel that was not worth $1.25 a week. If you really feel that, and you can send me an email or send me a note and say, hey, Schuster, I saw the pledge. I spent, $5 a month, and there's something about just the Wednesday alone Substack. Never mind the other Substacks, which are also great, but Wednesday is hilarious. If you legitimately tell me that, it wasn't worth your $5 and you can make a compelling argument, I'll give you your $5 back. That's my pledge. I will pay out of my own pocket. That's how much I think this Substack is valuable. It's worth it. Trust me, if you spend the $5 a month on the Blue Amp Substack, and yes, you can get it for free, but there's certain things you can't get that are behind the paywall. Trust me, this will be the easiest, best $5 you've spent. It's worth far more than $5. I promise you.
Right.
And then also, by the way, check out Cliff's Edge YouTube page to see some of the videos.
Please subscribe. That would be great. David's putting a lot up there right now. I will make this sort of, make this sort of pitch to you and bless you, which is if we bring in, more subscribers there, and I'm going to find a way to do this anyhow. But my goal is to double Wednesday's edition and put one out on Saturday or Sunday. So we've got David, depending on what he wants to do, instead of doing one video, he's either doing two, or David's a great writer too. Maybe we switch off roles, and on Saturday I do a video for you guys and he writes a column. But we're going to have two that are going to go behind the paywall for sure. And I'm even thinking that I'm going to do a third on Sundays right now. And again, I'm playing with all this numbers of what's coming in right now, but I'm going to do one where we're going to do a best of the week in videos, where I'm going to share a couple YouTube videos that we make for everybody, but then I'm going to have a paywall, and I'm going to make a direct video for you guys, where I'll do, a summary of the week, if you will, and that's going to be below the paywall. So we're going to add, if you guys do this, we will add 2 more editions. And I think the Wednesday one I have a humor column, but it's on a serious topic. So yes, we're able to laugh, but we make a point. David's videos are also, I mean, they're hilarious, but they're about real, like, important issues. New York Times pitch bot, you've seen him, speaks for himself, is funny as hell. And then I try to include Trumper attacks on me. This week you got a preview of one of them, which is I usually just include emails where they attack me, but because the Daily Caller was nice enough to attack me this week, I also have that in there. But you know, and I'm looking to even expand. I've got one or two other people in mind that do really interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like the content is. I've worked a lot of news organizations where I'm like, okay, I sort of like my own work, and maybe I like this person's, but I'm not going to watch the rest of the channel. Or I don't like. Everything on Blue and Substack, I love. It's the content is great, and I'm telling all of you who are watching now are like, oh yeah, you're just trying. No. Pay the $5. You'll be glad you did.
I mean, thank you, David. And again, I would agree. I'll just say that I love doing it like nothing else. And all these things, like this live stream right now, you know, this Wednesday afternoon one, the show we do tomorrow on Thursday, which that's specific because Substack gave us that show and supports it, so that's going to remain just on Thursday. But I will come back to doing the Tuesday one again. You know, I mean, if you love Matt, I can add another one and come back to Monday and have Matt do Tuesday. You know, like I will do more of these. I will do more. You know, I will do more stuff at Substack. I actually enjoy all of this. It's just I can't do it all and put in all the time. You know, we do have to reach certain economic markers, and David has to. I can't ask David to do certain things. You know, he has to make a living. He's got kids. They're going to want to go to college someday. I have a feeling, as one who has a kid going to college right now, and that's a harrowing thing you stare at when you stare at what that first year even is going to cost you. So I'm just saying, like, if you guys like what we're doing, you know, very much consider it's only that's, you know, it's very affordable, and I'll join David in that pledge. You know, if any of you are willing to go and buy a 1 year one, you decide, we'll come up with something. You decide 6 months into it, 3 months into it. No, I don't like this. You'll get all your money back from me. I know you'll like it. So that's where I am. We'll figure out a way to put this in writing and for me to send an email and all of that. And, you know, maybe tomorrow and Friday when I've got a little more time. But I think that is about it for today. Because speaking of that, I have a child to pick up who has seen. So as we usually do at the end of these, I used to do this thing, David, with them where I would pretend to be, you know, Jerry Maguire and say, who's coming with me, to try to get somebody to give us some super chats, super stickers. Come on, who's coming with me besides the goldfish? But I'll say anything that you guys can give, even a $1.99 super chat or super sticker, anything here to support the YouTube channel, to support this whole media enterprise, because my vision of it is David coming over it and it hopefully full time, and it being a Substack, YouTube combined with these live streams feature. I know what you're saying there, Brenda, the chaotic weed witch, which I like your name. You can only do so much, Cliff. Yeah, I can. But if I can add David Schuster more of the time, if I can add New York Times pitch about more of the time, I have one or two other folks I can add. There's a lot more we can do. We just need to bring in the funds. So on the way out, I'll say, hey, if you can give us even a 99-cent super sticker, as I always say, it helps. So please consider that and supporting the channel, supporting what we do. Most importantly, the Substack, going and becoming a paid subscriber. You know, it is pretty easy. Blueamp.co. It better not add an M on the end because it does that sometimes. There you go. That easy. But
hey, Cliff, enjoy the afternoon. Thanks, my friend.
David,
we'll talk soon.
Yep. Thanks for being here, buddy.
All right.
Take care. Oh, I'll let you out. Well, you know to do the bowel remove. So there you go. David's gone. So, okay. You know how this goes. I have a kid to go pick up, but I need somebody to come with me on the way out, even if it's just a 99-cent super sticker, just something for the road, something where I feel good, something where I can be happy, something where I'm like, hey, folks, support the show, support what we're doing, support what we're building. Can anybody? I do see we got a gift from Sheldon Hughes, of course, of one Cliff's Edge membership at YouTube, which is awesome. But in the last couple seconds of here, and there you go, Lefty Gramps, who has been a supporter everywhere. Patreon, Substack, thank you, my friend. You have done it. Thanks, Cliff and David. See you on Substack. We'll see you there. We'll have our show tomorrow. We may have 2 guests tomorrow, 2 interesting ones. The one guy you guys like a lot, the great Tony Michaels, will be joining us, and I've got a second one in mind who may join us too. So we should be having lots of fun, and you should like it. And Lefty Gramps, you are the good. Sheldon Hughes, of course, coming through too. You 2 guys, again, special category for you 2. Sheldon, Lefty, just writing shorthand here, and McAndrews, because he's often in that category too. I want to make sure you guys are loaded up with maybe there'll be some merch, maybe there'll be something. We're starting to get this all organized now. Veronica, who's often here, is terrific and has helped a lot. David's helping a lot, so it's getting better and better. And this poor ADHD saddled soul who has trouble sometimes, especially when a lot of stuff's going on, organizing it all, is getting some help. And so we're getting there. We're moving further along the path. But that's it. That's all she wrote. Seriously, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for supporting everything that I do. As I say, when I leave these things, as the sun sets slowly in the west, my friends, I bid you a fond farewell.